Hi, my name is John Smith. I am a solutions architect here at ExtraHop Networks, and today I want to do a quick walkthrough of our new Citrix bundle. A little bit about the bundle. The Citrix bundle here is made up basically of a number of different metrics that I've had to monitor and watch over the last 15 years of managing medium to large Citrix environments. So we've basically taken a number of the headaches that I've had to work with and put up with and kind of put them into a bundle so that they can then be used with ExtraHop for any number of medium to large size Citrix deployments, so that basically my 15 years of experience can be distilled into a series of dashboards and quick metrics that can then be reused over and over again throughout our customer environments. So real quickly, I want to go over some of our dashboarding capability. Here you see we're taking a look at the Citrix components. As most of you are aware, Citrix is very, very many things. There are a lot of moving parts involved with Citrix. And so what we're doing here is we're taking a look at the XML broker and its performance. Here you see basically a few high spikes in the 500 millisecond range. In the last 2 years of looking at WireData, specifically XML brokers, you certainly like to see this metric to in the single or double digits, if at all possible. Notice here you'll see a single XML broker. So the things I look at here when I'm looking at the XML broker is are there a lot of XML brokers? And has the customer maybe put too many of them in there? They're using regular app servers as XML brokers versus dedicated XML brokers. Then also just the overall performance of the XML broker. As you're aware, this is what paints the web portal. So you'll get complaints about slow launches, or you might get complaints about maybe some issues with all of the applications not painting. The indicator here, it's sort of a canary in a coal mine, is if you see these high metrics, it could be an indication of also some Active Directory issues. Maybe it's having a hard time authenticating because it's using a domain controller that's too far away. We also take a look at DNS errors. So here you'll see your DNS infrastructure. Again, this will wreak havoc on your Citrix environment, specifically the applications. Here you'll see the individual DNS server response times. As you can see, this particular DNS server is taking almost a full quarter of a second to resolve names. In environments where literally millions of DNS requests happen every hour, this is certainly not going to be an acceptable response time. This is another single digit or even 0.1 millisecond. This is generally where you want your DNS server response times to be. Certainly not in the double and definitely not in the triple digits. We also take a look at the LDAP processing. So here we're looking at the different LDAP servers. What I look for when I'm looking at LDAP servers, in a lot of Citrix environments, if they don't set up sites and services, you kind of leave it to Active Directory to choose a domain controller for you. So what you're looking at here is you want to make sure that there's nothing that may be across an MPLS link, something that's remote at a remote office somewhere, or something that's just not topologically feasible to be used as an LDAP server or even a domain controller. And then here, of course, you see the different processing times. We don't have any database errors. We have to work with a limited data set. Obviously, I can't show customer data, but we also monitor things like database errors. We can put things like web HTTP 500 errors. Basically, if you're an ExtraHop customer, this initial bundle will get you a high-level view. We can actually get very customized in terms of application mapping and the performance of the downstream applications. And then, of course, we can give you visibility into your PVS environment, how long those transactions are taking. If there are any errors or blue screening machines, we'll be able to provide that for you. Next, you have your launch detail. Within the launch detail, we're getting kind of an idea of the number of total launches here, the number of normal launches versus the number of slow launches. What we've done within the triggers is we've set a threshold for any launch that takes longer than 30 seconds. We'll classify that as a slow launch, and anything under 30 seconds will be classified as a normal launch. You can set these thresholds however you like. One thing I would like to point out that kind of sets us apart from other vendors, if you notice here, our dashboards are actually editable. You can actually put your runbook information in here, You can, in a way, these customized dashboards allow you to level up your operations staff or the first responders who are picking up the phone. One of the challenges with Citrix is that issues go from level 1 to level 3. There's really no level 2 person to step in and see what's wrong. And so you go from a help desk or a service desk person on the phone to, in most cases, a 6-figure resource that's troubleshooting a user issue. That becomes very expensive, and it does tie up a lot of time of a very expensive resource. And so you want to make sure that you provide as much information as possible so that things aren't unnecessarily escalated to your Citrix team. We'll cover that a little bit more as we move forward. And here we can find which users. Here we have the individual users that had slow launches. Again, I apologize for the small data set. We can get launches by server IP. We can get the launches by location. I'll talk about how we get this metric, but here we're grabbing essentially the launches by CIDR block. The launches, the total number of launches by user, by application, and then you have sort of your charts here at the bottom with the histograms, giving you kind of an idea of how busy your environment was that day. Within the Citrix summary, again, we give you some high-level data, once again a customized dashboard. And as we scroll down, and I do apologize, I have like 5 VMs running on this little Macintosh and it's not very happy. So here again we have launches by location. Here we get the average load time by application. Here we get the average login time by user. This can be valuable when you're troubleshooting issues, slow logons. The reason we graph the two together, so the load time is the actual time the user clicks the icon on the portal until they start interacting with the application. The next one on the login, this is sort of the Active Directory portion. Those are mutually exclusive metrics, but when you have a very long load time that's coupled with a long login time, generally I troubleshoot my Active Directory infrastructure, make sure sites and services is configured properly, something like that. So here you have your login times by user. Again, you may be able to correlate certain logins from specific user slow. That type of data can be very valuable, and so you can kind of take a look and see the logins by the individual users to try to extrapolate. Maybe there's an issue with a login script, maybe there's a drive mapping that doesn't exist anymore. Those are some of the issues that you can see. Here we provide some high-level latency. Again, we're providing latency by location, and here we have some channel information, so you can actually see some of the client-side channel traffic as well as the server-side channel traffic. The other thing I want to point out, I didn't mention it earlier, we're gathering all of these metrics without installing a single agent. We are completely passive, so there's no Firebird database running on it, there's no agent running on the system. We're able to provide all of this visibility by looking directly on the wire because we've licensed the Citrix ICA protocol. We'll go into a few more details here. Here you have your load detail. Again, this is your average load time. Here's your slow load times, and that took longer than 30 seconds. And then here's your acceptable load times. And as we scroll down here, you'll see the overall load times over a period of time. As you can see, it's within 10 seconds, and then we have this gigantic spike of 3 minutes to launch, right? So we'll get into drill downs. This is just some high-level data. Here we have acceptable load times, again, juxtaposed with the slow load times. And then as we scroll down, we can give you a little more information by user, by a specific host, or by server. And again, we're giving you the geospatial data here by the different floors. And then you have your load time here by application, and once again by user. I do want to get a little bit, and we have similar data here in the login side. So here on the login, again, we map the actual authentication portion of the launch, and you have some nice metrics here. I don't want to spend too long on the dashboards. Like I said, while a lot of companies and a lot of products will offer you a dashboard, we're the only ones that can offer you basically an empty canvas so that you can paint your own operational masterpiece. So we can give you these dashboards and you can use them, but you can also customize them. Things that I've seen put in these dashboards, if a If there's an issue, you can have the on-call rotation located here. Maybe put your Citrix support agreement number in there so that you know who to call. Basically make some things readily available and convenient for your operations teams. I want to get into the channel detail. So here within the channel detail, what we're looking at are the individual ICA channels. So some of the scenarios I've come across, back in the day, I might have had 1 or 2 published applications that were browsers. Now I would say closer to 30 to 40% of the applications are actually published browsers. That's sort of been a change in the last 5 or 6 years. So we had a user who had inadvertently not realized that the IE that they were using wasn't theirs, it was the published IE, and they proceeded to watch a Netflix movie. We never would have known that except that we were able to see the audio channel had a spike. Likewise, I used to support some SaaS developers who wanted to use their local SaaS. While I published SaaS in Citrix, all of their macros were local. So they used to grab these giant data sets and drag them across the ICA channel, what we called FTP over ICA. Well, we would have, I didn't have ExtraHop at the time, but that would have been able to show me the drive channel would have had a really big spike. And then, when the network team came to beat me up over my bandwidth utilization, I would have been able to see what's going on a little faster. So as we go through here, you can see we provide full visibility to any one of the ICA channels. Here you can see the printer utilization as well as the audio. Again, the audio can be kind of a canary in the coal mine. You might have a user that's on Spotify. You might have a user inadvertently not realize that their browser isn't their browser but the published browser. Especially with HDX, it's the performance is pretty good, maybe not so noticeable. So again, we're providing visibility into these ICA channels so you can go in there and see what's going on. The other one I like is probably one of the more common scenarios we end up troubleshooting, and that's the latency. So here you'll see the median latency, and I've got this in a 6-hour time frame. Here you see the median, the lowest latency, and then your highest average latency. Here's where we've, in this next section here, where we have high latency users, what we've done is we've used our trigger technology, and what a trigger does is, again, we don't have any agents, but we do sit back and passively observe the traffic. If we observe latency that traverses the 300 millisecond threshold, we account for those transactions here. So here what you're looking at are those users who have traversed the 300 millisecond threshold. And essentially, to quote my boss, Eric Thomas, these are the users who are about to call the help desk and complain. This kind of positions you to be a little more proactive so you can have an idea of what's going on. When user, ROAB calls up and says that their session is slow, before you spend a lot of time looking at applications and start the war room call, you can kind of go and say, hey, let's do something about the latency. And if you can see there, we're providing the location, we're providing the client IP address. A lot of times in your hospitals, a wireless router might go down, and so a user that was 10 feet from a wireless router is now 400 feet from a wireless access point. And so nobody really notices the access point go down, but you do notice the sudden spike in latency for their Citrix sessions. So going on down, we see the latency by location, latency by server IP, and then latency by user. We do provide latency by application, and then here you have an overall holistic look. And then we have a little more data here for your geospatial data in terms of your locations and individual users. So if you have MPLS links or if you have remote offices, we can account for the performance of those remote offices, not just for their ICA traffic, but all the rest of their traffic as well. So when somebody copies a big SIFS job, drags that across the MPLS link, you'll be able to see that traffic and kind of say, yes, well, the Citrix sessions are slow because somebody, made a big giant, SIFS copy, or because somebody, maybe is on Spotify, or there's basically something tying up all the bandwidth, limiting that's available for ICA. So I want to drill down a little. So these are good. These are good for operations. They're good for your upper management. But architects and engineers, they need a little bit more detail. So I'm going to drill in a little bit more to the application container. So I'm going to come here to the Citrix module, and I just want to go over what this is really quick. I'm going to take this out to 24 hours because I have a limited data set. Again, I can't use customer data, but I'm going to just walk through this app container real quick. So what we're looking at here in the overview, this is essentially all of the transactions that have sourced from your Citrix environment. So what you're looking at here, again, at the overview, and this is a canned one, you don't have to do any of the code, you don't have to do anything to get these, we'll provide it for you. But real quickly, the first place I like to look is my overview. And immediately what I have a transaction count for database tier, DNS tier, LDAP tier, storage tier, and web. So your Citrix environment, you may have database apps, you may have SOAP-based transactions, you could have CIFS transactions, you're going to have LDAP transactions for Windows. So this kind of gives you an immediate holistic view of all of those tiers, and as you can see, we had a spike in the database transactions there. Also, we can map the errors, and we can map those errors once again per tier. So here you see the errors on the database tier, they look fine, but then you see you had a bunch of DNS errors. This could be an indication of a problem. DNS will wreck your distributed applications if it's not in good order, especially legacy applications that you see in some hospitals. PTRs matter. Reverse lookups matter, and so these are a way to kind of get an idea if there are any real heavy DNS issues. Also, we can see errors in LDAP, any errors in NAS. It looks like we had some storage errors around 4 o'clock, between 4 and 6, and then any kind of web errors. So these are anything 500 and above. We'll take a look at those. Probably the first place I look in the overview section is actually the transaction processing time, because this is sort of where you'll see the dead canary, right, in the canary in the coal mine. So what we're looking for is a spike in processing time. So if you're looking through your tiers and then you notice suddenly, hey, your storage performance really started to skyrocket, let's say you have a roaming profile, something like that, or you might see a spike in your database tier. Maybe an index has become corrupted, something like that. You'll be able to see that performance across these tiers. And this is what really sold me on ExtraHop when I was a customer. I love our ICA visibility. I think our ICA visibility, when you factor in that we don't have to install agents, is second to none. However, what Citrix engineers need is visibility into those downstream environments. And that's what ExtraHop provides, is visibility into those downstream transactions and the performance or processing time of those individual transactions. And then we can give you a packet count as well as a byte count or a bandwidth, kind of a utilization count as well. The next, we have some customized pages that we've built for you. And here we're looking at, and this is something that we would have to customize, but it's not that difficult. If you've done anything with PowerShell, which most Citrix engineers have sort of been forced to do, our triggers are not going to be anything that you can't handle. So here we've sort of mapped out here we're looking at the campus latency, right? So this is the latency of your external users. Here's the latency of your 21st floor in Seattle, your 19th floor in Seattle, and here's the latency performance of your Philadelphia office. So the things I look for here, one, of course, you want to look for the 300 millisecond threshold, of course, but you also want to look, like if here in the Seattle 21st floor, if this is part of your switched infrastructure, obviously this should be single digits or 0. You shouldn't see 3 digits or even 2 digits of latency within your switched infrastructure. So that can be something that you have to worry about. Also, if you notice, as you click on these, you'll kind of get an idea of what their latency was throughout the day. And again, I apologize for the limited data set. Your data will have quite a bit of information in here once you take a look at your medium to large size Citrix environment. Next, we give you the campus-based launch times. Again, this is the launch time per campus. And we'll wait on this, sorry. Again, I have my 5 VMs. So here's your launch time by campus, and of course your login time by campus. The next custom app page is the infrastructure page, and so this is just a high-level view. Again, we give you your launch metrics. Here, you're a couple of, kind of give a couple of quick metrics. If you have any IO-based stalls between your Citrix server or your backend servers, any CIFS errors, here you see some DNS timeouts. If we click on this, we'll actually give you the server, the client, and we'll give you the query that actually timed out. Here you see some SRV records that are timing out. So these are some things that can be problematic within your environment. So seeing these timeouts, again, Windows will pine for up to 5 seconds to try to get that resolution. If it's a client-server app, that's 5 seconds of hourglass time. That could cause some user satisfaction or user experience issues. So we see your launches. You can get a quick view of your sort of slow launch to quick launch ratio. Here we actually have a launch failure. This is a custom, and this is the server that gave us the launch failure. This is a custom XML trigger that we wrote to look for 1030 errors. So those can be kind of maddening, trying to determine where they come from, especially in large VDI environments. Basically, we can give you an idea of which server gave you the 1030 error, and if it's in a pooled desktop group, you can go in there and just reboot those desktops. That usually fixes the issue. We're working on providing a user ID in here as well, but this is kind of a custom way where we tapped into the XML and we wrote a custom error so that you would be able to go in there and kind of track down those 1030 errors. And here we have some launch and login data. Again, this is by campus. You can go by subnet. Here we can go by individual users. So we're just basically giving you some high-level views into your environment. And if you scroll down, you'll also see here we've got the overall performance of your XML bundle. XML broker. Again, this is sort of your canary in the coal mine. This should be double digits or single digits, should never be 3 digits. Here we get into the DNS performance. Again, this is your DNS performance by server, and these should all make sense, right? You should never see the 4.4.4.2 or the 8.8.8.8. You should see all DNS servers that are within your environment, but also you want to make sure that the performance is good. As you can see here, 1.6 seconds per turn to resolve DNS names. That's going to destroy whatever client-server applications depend on that DNS server. So these are some of the things you can get a quick look into and kind of get an idea if you have any kind of a performance issue from the DNS side. And then, of course, you can see your client performance from the individual clients. The next set of visibility is sort of your Active Directory visibility. Here we're looking at the LDAP server processing time. All of these are in the single-digit millisecond processing time. Here you see your Kerberos. So this is your Kerberos authentication performance, and of course your global catalogs. And the important thing I look at here too, especially depending on the size of environment, is do you have an adequate number of domain controllers? Do you have an adequate number of global catalog servers? Some of the things that Carl Webster talks about in his his 10 things in AD that will wreck your Citrix environment, sort of incorporate some of that logic into what you're looking at here to try to make sure that everything looks acceptable. You should see no MPLS link, global catalog servers or domain controllers. Then we provide a client breakdown. So this is just a breakdown of your client devices. The next one I'll cover is latency. So again, latency can be problematic, and we do spend a lot of time troubleshooting it. So here you can click here and get your overall latency by location. We sort of looked at that in the overview one in your campus metrics. But here we can also account for the users with high latency. Again, we looked at these users. Things that I look for a common server. Although here because it's a test environment, we have a limited number. But also we get the idea of we have kind of get a better idea of what's going on. We're able to look at the client IP, their geospatial location, as well as the user ID. And if you go down into the latency cube, here you'll get the latency by application, and here we can scroll through this combo box, get the latency by client, by server. I apologize again, it's a limited data set. Here's your latency by server. And then we have something that I really like called the full trace. So if I click in here, you can see a number of latency metrics. And just for hypothetical, let's say this was instead of 255 milliseconds of latency. Kind of borderline, but not unusable, I don't think, not in my experience. Again, the 300 millisecond threshold seems to be the worst. But let's say this was 1255. So what I like to do is here you see the server Lime. I'll type Lime in here. And and follow through this scenario with me. So again, let's hypothetically say this user has 1.2 seconds of latency. What you can say is, yes, I understand you have high latency, but there are 37 other connections connected to that server who have acceptable latency. One of the maddening things is that this will be reported, or this will be escalated as a Citrix slowness issue. 99.9% of the time, you'll look and you'll see a client IP. One client IP will be fast, another client IP might be slow. This user could be sitting in a Starbucks with 100 other people. They could be at the airport. They could be something going on like the wireless access point breaking. The point is that this would be a scenario where the on-premise IT staff would need to look at the problem, and you're not really spending too much of your time doing someone else's job. I understand, I'm not trying to tell people how to get out of work, but I am kind of trying to tell you how you can avoid wasting your time with something that you're probably not going to be able to fix in the first place. Unfortunately, these will be escalated 99.9% of the time. This will be escalated as a Citrix slowness issue. And so this is sort of what you're stuck with dealing with. What we try to do is give you a little more high-level visibility so that you can go in there and kind of get a high-level look and say, hey, this is more of a campus issue. This isn't something that we're going to look at on the Citrix side. So that's the latency, that's the full trace. So this is all data that we can provide for you without you writing a single line of code. You don't have to write any code. Again, also, there's no agents that will be installed. But let's go back to what really sold me on ExtraHop. Because while we've got these custom pages, we also have all of your layer 7 transactions. So these are the downstream transactions. This is what I used to do in EdgeSite. If you've ever been to EdgeSite under the hood, a lot of the ad hoc queries are how to get visibility into the downstream transactions. Unlike EdgeSite, this is all real-time data that gets updated every 30 seconds. So you can come in here, let's say you have your web transactions. Let's say you're publishing PeopleSoft and you want to see the performance of the individual URIs. Let's say we get a complaint about PeopleSoft slowness. We can actually come in here and find out which URIs are the slowest. In fact, let's say we host an enterprise application called gstatic, right? I can just type gstatic in here and get the performance of every single URI stem for that particular web application. And as you can see here, we have some images. I've actually had slowness complaints where someone had inadvertently had a really high resolution image that was taken 6 or 7 seconds to download. That was impacting the performance of the page initially. So these are some of the things that you'd be able to go in here and look at. If there's a slow part of the web application, you could come in here, click on this, and kind of see where it got slow. If you get creative, or if you want to get comfortable with triggers, you can actually tie user IDs to specific URI stems. But this is basically the visibility into that downstream web server that's working through your published browser. And you can have some visibility into if there's an issue with that particular web server. Or if one of these URIs makes a query to a database, you would see the slowness in the URI and then escalate that or hand that off to the server, to the web server administrator, or to the DBA. And basically you're not spending so much of your time trying to troubleshoot someone else's system. That's what I'm trying to drive home here. Likewise, we can give you your database transactions here. Again, a slow database application will be escalated as a slow Citrix issue. So you can come in here and kind of see the performance of your individual stored procedures. Again, the demo dataset doesn't have it, but if you use the @, this is the performance of every single table, right? So this is select from the product table versus we might have let's see, or even here within the inventory, we have the select performance, which is a read, and we have the update performance, which is a write. The important thing to remember is that you can click on this, and if you see a particular table, and I've been through this before, if you see a particular table is slow, or you see a particular table was running along fine and then suddenly got slow, again, this is that corrupted index scenario, or an issue with somebody, running an ad hoc query. If someone runs a select star that causes the database to get really slow, or they're doing any kind of data warehousing during production time. The important thing is that you'll have visibility into the downstream SQL Server or Oracle. We support DB2. Any number of the larger or more popular database engines will support visibility into. We can actually get down to the actual query if you want to. You can use one of our triggers to get actually down to the ad hoc query that was run or the stored procedure that was run, and it'll give you the performance of those individual stored procedures. I would point out too, next to Citrix engineers, I think our second biggest advocates are DBAs, because it's essentially the same thing as running Profiler, except that it won't tip over your Citrix, or I'm sorry, it won't tip over your SQL Server. If anyone's been a DBA, you can only run Profiler for so long. Well, we can give you the same visibility that Profiler does with essentially zero impact to your SQL Server, so you can actually share this data with your DBAs. Likewise, we give you visibility into your LDAP performance. We kind of looked at that earlier with some of these custom web pages. We can see the DNS performance. We can take a look at the individual errors that you're having that are failing to look up. Likewise, we can look at your storage infrastructure if you see, and take a look at the errors here. CIFS is kind of a noisy protocol, but you can type something in here like, here you see roaming profiles, right? So if you want to see errors related to profiles, you can just type in profile here. Or if you think there's something wrong getting the group policies down, you can type sysvol here. And here you see we actually have a sysvol error. Possibly a group policy didn't get brought down. So this kind of gives you a visibility into the CIFS environment as well. The important thing is that we give you kind of a holistic view of your entire infrastructure. As you can see here, these are all of the layer 7 transactions that have sourced from your Citrix environment. If you have multi-tiered applications that have, say, a SOAP or a RESTful tier that accompanies also a database tier, or you have, like you see, MQ, if you need to map the database portion that accompanies these MQ transactions, we can actually map out your applications as part of the onboarding engagement, so that you have a full holistic view of not just from the Citrix server to the next transaction, either directly to the next web server or the database server, but if that application is tiered out, we can give you visibility into the rest of those tiers. This has gone a little bit too long, I apologize, but I just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough of our new bundle. I want to thank Tim Hughes, our Boston SE, for the dashboards and some of the JavaScript cleanup, and we would love to do a POC with you. What I can tell you is that I was a Citrix engineer for 15 years. I was not a real big fan of tools, and this is one tool that really was, for me, a tool has to be worth a body, right? Because when you look at the cost of tools, I look at it and I say, wow, I could buy a person, or I could get 1.5 or 2 people for the cost of that. To me, this was worth 5 people for me and in my environment, and it was something that the entire organization could use. Again, I want to say thank you. I know this is a long video. Thanks for watching, and if you're interested, get a hold of us, and we'd be happy to do a POC with you. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.